Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is Jonas Reporters for the 23rd of December as we get towards the, short week here for trading holiday break. Lots of things taking place in the world. As if you haven't seen, of course, the headlines are going to read Trump threatening Panama. But, obviously he's been doing his reading on Monroe Doctrine and a little bit of Teddy Roosevelt there and suggesting that, we can use economic power of the United States and its commercial interests, really to dictate a strong foreign policy, which says that you're going to be a fair trader or you're not going to trade with the U.S. That's going to have broad implications, and of course, it terrifies the rest of the world because they understand that while you can exploit your own workers for cheaper prices, at the end of the day, if you're not going to do it in a fair and competitive way, then you're not going to be able to trade with the U.S. for free. And that has not been the policy for quite some time, as the broad globalist view was that if you lift all these other countries out of their obscurity and poverty, that you'll have more trading partners in the future. And of course, that has been at the expense of domestic workers in America, and which is why you continue to see these massive flood of immigration. And that for a couple of reasons. One, it supports big business keeping labor low. I mean, these are obvious things. I'm not saying anything that's new. And you also fill in the population gap, which is happening across all countries, except for in the African continent and some parts of Asia. So even for China, it's a big threat as their population is going to decline. So from the ES standpoint, overcome the shorts here with the long side trade of it. Didn't take too long. It wasn't much of a MBI weight spike here from the short. You had this brief reset in there, and this is, I think, more in the healthy side of things because we filled the positive extremes. So that pretty much clarified everything, and you had that from last Friday's trade right there. We went to that final extreme, clean and simple, no argument, no problems. We did the same thing for the NAS, which is why we put these up there, and you're going to end up with a potential little rally going in towards the end of the year. And of course, everyone's got that anticipation, but you can already see the Trump presidency has started early. He's not hesitating to really jump into the foreign policy fray, and that's going to have some impact. Now, how many battles he's going to have domestic? Oh, quite a few. I mean, you already saw it with the budget situation, where pretty much Biden was non-existent in it. It was all about Trump and tweets, and you had some outrageous comments from congressmen saying, "Oh, well, a tweet could unhinge, the people's house doing it." And it's like, well, yeah, because it got people involved in the system and started making phone calls, and it wasn't business as usual. And this gets back to where if you really look at the broader clarity of things, it wasn't until Elon Musk bought X and turned it back into a free dialogue where anybody could say anything without being banned. The dynamic, it took some months, but the shift has been dramatic. And they no longer have safe harbor to basically just silence their enemies, which has been the case. And this is why you see governments around the world falling apart. You see them actively attacking X in Brazil and that because, when you can keep information from people, it works. But you're seeing it falling apart in Britain. Germany, in particular, is just a disaster. I mean, they are plunging rapidly into a hole. France, same thing. You see in Canada, Trudeau's under threat. All of these governments are falling apart, and it's simply because not Trump, but the reality is that freedom of speech has returned in a lot of areas where since before COVID had been silenced completely. And this fascism, is what I call it straight up. It's where government, in league with certain big businesses to control narratives, have limited freedom in broad aspects of all things, and paid a price for that. And now, some of that's getting reversed. It's not completely done. You still don't have any free speech in Britain in that, but uh, one step at a time. Oil still holding even. There's not enough really to move things in a significant way at this particular stage. Oops, got it back here. That said, oil is hugely important because, as I was talking about, some people said it's ridiculous, because you hear all these articles about commercial real estate and things, and how it's dying, whatever. And I think that that's just a complete misread of the direction that things are going to go on. If oil in that drives, you force federal workers back into their offices, you begin to end this remote work thing, and you start moving people again. And commercial real estate is going to be on an uptick because companies are going to be forced to come back to America to do things. And I think that's going to be, you want to call it an industrial revolution, whatever. It's going to take some time, but that's where the trajectory of where they're going to go, at least my view of how Trump sees things from a business standpoint, is spot on with that. And it's going to be interesting to see how much the Fed fights him, because the Fed is fighting multiple battles here. They've got obviously the debt situation that is going to continue to be a problem. But as you saw with this budget situation and why it's relevant, you removed a lot of this pork, but now that's going to have some impacts because a lot of this money goes to businesses to support them, which is unproductive. Never has been good because it's always done without the kind of stipulations that promote growth. It's just about largesse, and that's not effective. You can see the effects of what that largesse does in a broader context from an EU standpoint. The collapse of the euro is not stopping. I mean, they're going to do their best to try and hold the line, but they can't. You can see that Germany is imploding so fast. It's hard to describe when you look at the numbers of unemployed that are starting to develop from all the major companies there, from manufacturing on down. I mean, I was watching just the other day a list of all of the different companies that are laying off in broad swaths because of this push for climate ridiculousness. You can see what it's done to the grid in the U.S. It's even worse than the grid overseas. And this is where confrontation with Russia and that from an oil standpoint, not a good idea. So make friends with the people who have the energy to supply things to make things less expensive, and you prosper, or utilize the resources that you already have. And that's what it comes down to. From a gold standpoint, again, until these things are resolved, you're going to have a serious problem containing deficits in that. And so when we move to the crypto space of it, the reality is that you're going to have some up and downs, but I think more or less now you're going to start moving into actual policy directives as to the drivers for it. So I don't think that you're going to see a linear move all the way up for crypto in that, because again, it's going to depend on what policies and how that implementation can take, some kind of hold. But there's going to be a lot of disruption going on in the early part of this coming year, and you need to be prepared for that. So people say, well, why talk about the politics of that? Because it's going to have a major significant effect on the economic drivers going forward. And if you're not understanding it and don't get confused by some of the bizarre narratives that are out there, you're going to be misguided. And the real money is going to go after the things that they warmonger or fear the most, because they're using that to drive them down so that they'll be able to grab them up cheaper and move them on further. And so when you look at opportunities, I mean, obviously from a local standpoint, commercial real estate is going to be the number one. Now, of course, that's going to be selective to those states that are cooperative in this kind of move. And I think you can already see the alignment of how that's going to go. And so your red states probably are going to fare a lot better than blue ones unless they adapt and move in a direction that's going to allow, more of that free market behavior that has been pretty much stifled quite a bit. From an ETH standpoint, you can see hanging on that 50% range, still at NBI white leading. So there's still some softness built into the crypto space at this particular stage. When we look here at the European session right now, it's kind of modest. And of course, we have the holiday coming up here very shortly. So you're going to have very light volumes in that. So there's not a whole lot tension to play into it. But from an intraday standpoint, when you get a trend move, it's likely to continue simply because there isn't that much resistance against it. But even in those cases, you still get it evening out. Obviously, we've created a bunch of positive extremes within here, and some of those will get filled back in from a shorter time frame, but in the longer time frame, things are still reasonably bullish. No question about that. Optimism still outweighing the potential negatives, even though there are quite a few of them. So it's just going to be a matter of following how that goes, and we'll see how the money tries to move things and whether or not it's one of those where the Fed steps in and does some crazy stuff, and we'll keep an eye out for that. Of course, we'll see it in the readings. But as always, anything relevant, I'll let you know. But I hope everyone prepares for a nice little holiday break, and we'll start setting things up for the new year. Very exciting. Could be quite dramatic. So look forward to it. Trade well. We'll talk to you later.